Perhaps that's because I'm younger than you all. David?
No, I don't think there has been. I think if we actually look at patterns of the behaviour of public figures, it's actually, in reality, very little different now from what it was before. What I think has happened, and we've actually begun to address this, at a much broader level, there hasn't been a collapse of moral standards. There's been a kind of moral value, let's take a phrase, vowel shift. Some sort of change has happened. Now, Janet got very cross with me when I said it was democratic, but I believe it is democratic. This is exactly what people like de Tocqueville in the 19th century thought was going to happen. A world in which there are no peaks and there are no troughs, in which we all get much more like each other, in which we're much more tolerant, much more easygoing. But you know, there are some areas that we haven't touched on at all, where young people do care passionately, where an alternative morality has been invented over things like animal welfare, over ecology. We may think this doesn't matter, they do.
Janet, do you go along with that, Janet? Interestingly enough, a lot of this discussion is focused on heroes, on role models or whatever. Do we actually really require
I think that's
to imitate people in order to be good?
Yeah, no, I think that's a red herring. I'm not happy with this drift into the discussion about heroism. It seems to me that what everybody is very concerned about is not so much that we lack heroes, as that we lack the most simple, mutually agreed codes of social behaviour. And the vacuum that has been left by that disagreement and by the idea that we all must tolerate everything and the worst sin is to be morally judgmental, that vacuum is what is worrying everybody, and that is what is, if not causing, at least exacerbating so much genuinely vicious and antisocial behaviour.
But hang on, what's worrying people is, surely, is that there are no people to look up to. Every time we look up to somebody...
People? I'm not sure that is what's worrying
Well, I think what people are actually looking for are good examples. That's the way that children learn. They learn by imitation. And the difficulty is that we're not giving good examples. George Thomas tells a story when he was a teacher. He used to wear a handkerchief stuffed up his sleeve. And one day the boys were making a terrible noise. They turned around and said, "Boys, blow your noses." 20 little boys all produced 20 hankies and blew their nose because they copied their teacher. What's happening is that we haven't got good role models to follow. And that's where it's not so much the hero, it's good examples so that people know how to make moral decisions. Constantly people are saying to me, "Tell me what to do. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. Give me some help here." People are looking for help.
Edward, do you go along with this? So let me move on to this other point about who's to blame. Families a problem, schools a problem, church a problem, politicians a problem?
One of the things I always worried about this programme was that we would find ourselves moralising. What I didn't like about Mr Chapman was that he was casting around a lot of blame on everybody else, and I don't know no great desire to do it because I'm far from certain that what they've come up with is all bad. I hear what Janet says. When I look at my daughter's friends, the boys and girls of 18, 19, 20 that we see around the house, I think they're all a bit gormless. I also think that they're sweet, tender-hearted, they love animals, an awful lot of them are vegetarians, they are extraordinarily gentle. This is a fact about this generation. In things like that, they're nicer than we were.
But
they don't have our
two
brutality.
generations, aren't there, growing up parallel to one another. One that you describe, our middle-class, well-educated children, and quite another, which is brutal beyond belief.
But to be fair to the other class, that what kept them down in the past was a great deal of brutality used against them. You know, the harshness and cruelty of schools, the harshness and cruelty of treatment of the young poor was not something I want to see.
But one of Mr Chapman's points, surely, was that the parents can't tell their children what's right and wrong because they're no longer sure themselves.
Yes.
Well, there's partly that, but it's also perhaps that we've learned that we can't tell other people all that much, and that, as the government should have found it over back to basics, shut up, David, as it were, is good advice all round.
Aye to that.
But
you can't have a moral framework that is entirely dependent on what people think
It wasn't a question of telling people at one time. At one time, there was an invisible consensus, which everybody imbibed, you know, with their mother's milk. I mean, this wasn't a question of
we really are being very dangerous here. I think there might have been a behavioural consensus, the behaviour you put up in public, but you read any political diary of the 1930s and see actually what people got up to in private. That's the point that I'm trying to bang home. Now, there's something else that we should have been talking about. If we went back to Rhodes' opening remarks, he made clear there were two really quite separate issues. Morning assembly, which, if I remember it, never affected me one jot at all, apart from sending me to sleep. The second was simply straightforward, sensible discipline in learning. Now, many other countries would not dream of having this debate. In France, schools are not about setting moral examples, they're about producing highly disciplined structures of learning. And it seems to me we should have been introducing some of those elements into our conversation as well.
Last quick word for you,
What worries me, listening to the witnesses, is that they've been talking about a breakdown of morality. In the end, it comes down to money, greed and selfishness, and that's no basis for individuals or for a society.
And on that optimistic note, that's it for this week. From our panel, Janet Daly, David Cook, Edward Pearce, Dr. David Starkey, who's been especially well behaved this week, and from me, until next week, good night.
Witness Placido Domingo in his element.
Kind of accelerate a little.
My experience as a singer, I really want to pass to other people when I'm conducting.
Not early, not early.
This is what I love.
And film director Herbert Ross in his.
Excuse me, you're late. Can you hear Accendi? What's your cue?
He's a monster.
Two very different sides of the operatic stage.
He's on his way. Maestro, please.
Placido Domingo conducts Puccini's La Bohème tomorrow at 8 o'clock on BBC2.
Danny Baker's guests this week include Terry Venables, Joe Brand and Tony Bennett. That's on BBC One in about 5 minutes. Well, that's unless you're watching BBC Scotland on One, where you can see that later at 12:50.
Who are you? National Security. Security of what?
For what reason would the military have to kidnap one of their own pilots?
That is not him. That is not my husband. They've done something to him.
You failed to tell me a few things.
Leave this case alone, Agent Mulder. Drop the case.
No! The X-Files, Monday, 9:30 on BBC2.
BBC2's Lost and Found season has unearthed a piece of cult cinema this week. The man who directed The Silence of the Lambs, Jonathan Demme, made his directing debut with this tough, uncensored adult film, which contains unrestrained language, a violent story of stir-crazy women. Caged Heat. In next week's Lost and Found season, an early film in the career of Bernardo Bertolucci, a heady mixture of sex and politics combined in a powerful Italian film drama, Before the Revolution, next Saturday evening at 11:45.
Cripes, he's fast.
Yes.
And that's fast.
Yes.
But not half as fast as the fast jaw.
You ain't seen me. Run.
The dummy, the drop of the shoulder, oh, the shimmy. Although, actually, some of it's not really very fast. Penskins, Baldies, Teddy Boys.
Tango, a whiskey, a walnut, a whoop, a Mars bar, a popcorn, corn chips.
Brilliant! Tuesday on BBC2 at 10 o'clock. Brilliant!
High-speed laughs now on BBC2 in the first of a new comedy series all the way from Oz.